Welcome, gentle reader, to this fun episode of Everything is Everything. Under the banyan tree, who loves to play with me? Here shall she find no enemy but summer and rough weather.
So we have reached episode 100. This is a moment of great celebration, perhaps even great relief. We got here. पहुंच गए, sir. And, this is going to be an AMA episode, Ask Me Anything. We solicited questions through the interwebs. The questions have arrived. They are excellent questions. But I feel I should ask you, Ajay Shah, how do you feel? Episode 100, boss?
Yeah, that's cool. You remember long ago, we made a pact signed in blood that we would find the bloody mindedness, that superpower of bloody mindedness to last to 100 episodes. And then we would engage in existential questions. Sitting under a banyan tree, we would ask, is everything and everything worth doing?
Is it worth doing?
I think yes. What do you think?
What's your experience?
I've liked it. It's been hard. Putting out one show every week has been hard. I'm constantly worried and scared about creeping to the edges of expertise. Okay, so like I've spent my whole life being very careful around what you know, what you say, and trying to be thorough. And over 100 episodes, many times I am in material that we would happily chat over lunch, over chai, but it is frankly not one's role of expertise. I apologize to you, gentle reader, if I have on occasion misrepresented my standard errors. We need to manage ourselves on what you know and what you don't know. So that stuff has been uncomfortable in handling, but I think this is fun. I think it's a good show. We have thousands of viewers. I think this is a novel product. This hasn't been done before. It's tapping into a unique kind of curiosity in the world.
So, when we started, I think we started slightly at cross purposes. So one thing that, we had common agreement on is that we enjoy talking to each other. We have good conversations. We will have good conversation here. What is the problem? But then when it came to the vision for the show, I think at one point you looked at it kind of like how you looked at papers, that what is my novel insight? Is there a reason for this to be in the world? Am I producing something new? Does it come from a place of deep knowledge and expertise? Well, the way that I sort of looked at it was more a sense of everything is everything. Let's bring frames from different fields to bear on other fields, and let us talk without the pretense of certainty. Many times we will talk about things we don't know much about. It's okay as long as you're transparent about that and you're shooting ideas and you're asking questions and you're speculating, but speculating with transparency and etc. etc. So you don't always have to have the 20-year expertise that you do on a subject. You could be like we did with our art episode recently. You could be on a journey of discovery and you're sharing the enthusiasm of that journey with someone. And I think that makes for interesting conversations. A lot of the shows I like are kind of like that. So I sort of, yeah, I mean, but we are figuring it out and we are sort of finding common ground finally. And yeah, it takes a long time to learn shit, doesn't it? So let's begin with the questions. Let me tell you the procedure. We shared a form where people had to give questions. Many people gave questions, great questions, the best questions in all caps. And Ajay had the task of collating them and organizing them. And now he will have the task of sort of asking them to both of us. And if there are any name question mix-ups, please note I had nothing to do with this. I am doing a sort of cover my ass here. So go right ahead.
There were a very large number of questions, so I've had to be choosy. Otherwise, this would run for 6 hours. So apologies, gentle reader, if your question got omitted. Also, I'm going to rephrase everybody's question in a more terse manner. People have taken great effort writing questions carefully. I will try to do a terse version. Okay. Aditya Jain asks Amit, after talking to hundreds of thoughtful people, what separates them from the rest of us?
That's a really good question. And at one level, it feels a little pompous to divide the world into thoughtful people and thoughtless people, right? And obviously, anyone making that division would immediately put them among the thoughtful people. And I'm a bit wary of being so pompous. I think in many situations, we are thoughtful, in many situations, we are thoughtless. I think there are two things at play here which I want to talk about. And one of them is it's been my constant lament that most people don't do self reflection, especially men. don't do self reflection. I think I came to it later in life than I would have liked to. And when you start self reflecting, when you internalize that, I think it then becomes a virtuous cycle where number one, you're always thinking about your own life and ways to make it better and ways to attempt to be the best version of yourself and so on and so forth, ways to learn more about the world, etc., etc. And that's useful rather than live like a zombie. You're just on a track, you're going on the track, you're not reflecting. That's a good thing. Number two, you are then more likely to seek out other people like yourself, other quote unquote thoughtful people, and you are a sum total of your influences. So, a bunch of thoughtful people come together, they will all be, they will all sort of reaffirm that thoughtfulness and that self reflection in each other, and that's a good thing to happen. Whereas if you're just in a groove, then you just stay on that groove. Like one of my friends who is a CXO of a big company, he tells me that when he goes out with other people in the CXO suite from his company or others, he complains that there's nothing to talk about. They don't read books, they don't watch world cinema, they're not interested in world affairs or history or any of that stuff. So it'll be the same cliched cricket, Bollywood, and office gossip. And that is tiresome. And 95% of people are on a groove like that. They stop living. If you, as Dylan says, if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying, they're dying or dead. Right. So I think there's a virtuous cycle in play that if you are a thoughtful kind of person, you reinvigorate yourself every day, and that's useful. But the other angle to this is we contain multitudes. There are many things in my life about which I am thoughtless, where I am just on a groove. I take things for granted. For example, um, uh, I don't make like I don't do the kind of investments with my finances that you do, for example, that kind of well thought out strategy, which you would expect from me because in other domains I am like that, but not in this domain. Or I don't look after my health the way I look after my mind, right? And that is, another problem. So I think we contain multitudes in many domains. We are thoughtful in other domains. We are thoughtless. And, but what was the question about thoughtful people? What sets them apart?
How are they different from others?
I think a fundamental quality of self reflection um, sets them apart, even if they don't extend it to every part of their lives. At least that effort is being made. While a lot of people, and me for a lot of my life, a lot of people don't reflect on, what they're going through, why they're doing what they do, why they want what they want.
And Aditya Jain asks me, you have worked with a lot of politicians in the country. What gives you hope for the future when you talk to them? I'm actually very bullish on politicians and their role. Vijay Kelkar always taught me that officials are ingrained around conservatism. It is only politicians who are entrepreneurs, and politicians are talking with real people all the time. Well, some politicians don't talk to the people. Most politicians are out there in the hurly burly, okay, walking tens of kilometers, thousands of kilometers, meeting people, talking to people. It is energizing. They get shit in a way that most of us don't. So I am fascinated and charmed by Indian politicians. All the major milestones in Indian history have been politicians rolling the dice and doing something new. So I'm very enthusiastic about Indian democracy and the nature of politicians and their incentives to do things right and their information and knowledge. In their heart, they know about the problems of agriculture, about the crisis of employment, about the place of globalization and all that. While they may mouth certain slogans, they know a lot more than they let on to.
Can I double click on Aditya's excellent question and just ask that we think of the political marketplace as supply responding to demand, and therefore you would say that politics is downstream of culture, Andrew Breitbart's famous quote. And therefore, the question is that if our society has all the fractures that we see, if it has all the misconceptions about economics and policy that we do see around us, how do politicians fight that? Does a politician then have to be an outlier and use their own judgment in, situations where the path of least resistance is to give the populist handouts that would get them votes?
But the great leadership is all about doing more than that. So, one vision of a politician is you run polls, you find out what's popular, and you adopt those positions. But you know, if there is a great man theory of history, it is about the people who did not do that. And again, we find leadership
So, what percentage of our polity is like that?
a lot.
Percentage. You're a numbers man.
20%.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, Onkar M says to Amit, when are you going to write your next book?
It's on the agenda. I wrote a book I'm not terribly happy about in 2008, and yeah, so it came out in 2009. But yeah, I should have written 10 books by now. This is one of the great laments that decades have gone by. If you are a young person, I would tell you that, you know, procrastination is really dangerous. The years go faster and faster as you age. But I am hopeful. There are decades ahead of me still, hopefully, as you have assured me with all your talks on longevity. So we shall get it done. I mean, that is my immediate sort of medium term plan, that, you know, write the books I should write, and both fiction and non-fiction, but just, yeah, kind of get it done. It's just really bugging me now.
Is that a cross my heart and hope to die for 2025 release?
Nothing's going to release this year, but no, but I've just really been dragging my feet. I think the story of my life is I kick off projects like The Seen and the Unseen and Everything is Everything, and then there's a weekly deadline, so I get it done. And it seems from the outside that I'm super efficient. And but actually, the things that I really, really deeply want to do, I haven't had the discipline and willpower to do them. But we shall set it right.
Okay, Soham Ranade asks Amit, uh, would love to have an episode where you start at the crack of dawn, when gentle readers can barely make out both of your silhouettes, and by the time the conversation is complete, you are both basking in the glory of morning sunshine.
So this is very easy for Ajay Shah to do, because Ajay Shah is a morning lark. Amit Varma, sadly, is a night owl. If you read the excellent book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, you will find that 30% of people, I think approximately, are night owls. Our natural rhythm is just completely different, and we suffer the tyranny of the larks, as it were. So in this case, Ajay Shah, no matter how much you complain about the state, you are complicit in this tyranny that is being waged upon my people, the unfortunate night owls. So it's really impossible. What typically happens is we come to a friend's farm in Karjat to shoot. It's a lovely place. But in summer, for example, we're shooting now in summer and the weather's been nice today. But it's too hot for most of the day to shoot. So either we shoot indoors or we shoot at a time where it is either dusk or dawn, and dawn is not possible for me. So it ends up being dusk, which means inevitably sometimes the recommendations happen in deep darkness. But well, I mean, it is what it is. We would like to be outdoors as much as possible, but waking up in the morning is just like animal cruelty at this point. So
Okay.
so right after answering that question about sunshine, the sun suddenly became harsher, though we are in the middle of the day, and we shifted into the shadow. And as we were shifting into the shadows, Ajay Shah was wafting eloquent about how much fun it is to grow mushrooms. Kindly elaborate. Why is it fun to grow mushrooms?
If you've grown plants, mushrooms are different. Okay, so mushrooms are fungi and they require a peculiar combination of conditions under which to grow. And then just the way in which you have a container and the way they erupt, just all kinds of things happen. It's alien, like the fungi are an alien kingdom compared with the plants. And so that's why I am like edge of the seat excitement when it comes to growing mushrooms.
You sit near the pot and wait for it to erupt.
This is all theoretical. I haven't done it yet. Right now, I'm just like, my stomach is bursting with anticipation of the glory of growing mushrooms.
You must be a fungi. But anyway, so next question. Go for it. Let's do it.
Okay. Reena says to me, what should an ideal tax system look like? Aditya Raj says to me, how should a revenue neutral new direct tax code for India look like? How should the corporate tax be designed? How should capital gains tax be designed? Gentle reader, you don't want me to start answering these questions because they require a book length treatment.
Which you are writing.
So, Vijay Kelkar, Arvind Modi and I are lifetime tax geeks. I will sell Arvind Modi to you on the grounds that his excitement about tax policy, after having done it for 40 years, is comparable to my excitement about growing mushrooms, and I haven't even grown any mushrooms.
Which is why you're excited about it. Yeah.
So Vijay Kelkar, Arvind Modi and I have promised each other that we're going to build a book on tax policy. We just want to get to the core of the ideas. So there's of course interests and institutions and political economy and all that. But there is an economics core. There is a beautiful logic on how to think about taxes. So hold your breath. A book is coming.
And we'll do mega episodes on it. But remember, it is not a book about taxation alone. It is a book about theft, because taxation is... Continue.
Okay. Siddharth Sharma says to Amit, we often see economists with conflicting solutions for the same problem. We're not well versed in the technicalities. We know ideology is everywhere. How do we engage in a conversation and a debate between economists where we know we are weak on the technical details and we know both contain ideology?
So my approach is number one, if I'm not sure of what they're talking about, I will refrain from having an opinion necessarily. But number two, you may not understand the intricacies of economics or be able to do regressions and all of that. But if there are certain frameworks that you're clear about, then that can help. For example, if you see that an economist on one side of the debate is coming from a zero-sum point of view of the world, you know that is wrong by now, I hope, having watched all these episodes. So if you are, if you can apply the framework and say that, okay, this person is, for example, using inequality and poverty as if they are the same thing, then you know that there is something wrong there because they're not the same thing, right? Only in a zero-sum world are they the same thing. In a positive-sum world, they're not the same thing. So it's then very easy to say that, okay, this guy is bullshitting. I'm just talking about how I would do it. I'm sure there are aspects of the world you understand and frameworks of the world you understand, and you can go by that. And the second thing to note is that who is taking the strict party line, the strict tribalistic line, right? Like one of the things that used to be the case till 10 years ago in America, though now it's completely upturned, is that on an entire package of beliefs, the Democrats would speak with one voice. On another package, the Republicans would speak with one voice. So there'll be standard positions, for example, on abortion, on trade, on taxation, etc., etc. And these are across subjects and all that. So there is no reason that you should cater to the entire party line or the entire, what would be expected of you if you're part of that ideological tribe. So if someone is hewing too closely to what you would expect from them, then I'm a little bit suspicious. The kind of people I am attracted to are the free thinkers who are not, who you can't exactly always, pinpoint them. And in many cases, like for example, when it comes to freedom, right? I look at freedom for me, freedom is a core value, whether it is in the marketplace or in the bedroom, right? And therefore, as a freedom absolutist, I support free markets and I also support women's right to abortion because women own their bodies, right? And but you will often find people on one side of the divide who will say things for free markets but against individual freedom, and vice versa. And when you see incoherence, then perhaps it is time to question that how thought through are this person's positions. Are they merely taking a tribalistic line? But otherwise, by and large, if there is an argument between two people on a subject I don't really grok, it is not imperative for me to have an opinion on it. I can just wait and learn.
I have one value addition in this. It's an obvious idea, but it's worth putting it out clearly. Uh, Different persons have different levels of freedom of speech vis-a-vis their organizations or institutions or political parties or governments. Okay? And I don't mean to say this in the pejorative. It just is that, if you work for the United States Federal Reserve, you will have a certain pressure to conform within rules, procedures, communities, norms of that institution. And some institutions are more open than others in demanding loyalty and demanding obedience. So, when we see the utterances of a person in an institution or a party or a community that demands loyalty, then we should listen to those paragraphs as the expression of the party line rather than as independent thought. So, don't hold them to the standard of sharp logic and perfection, because the internal decision making of all organizations is faulty, and somehow some working consensus has come up and the person has to parrot that. The person has to say the party line, and they're not expected to be reasonable, they're not expected to be correct. Similarly, if you work in a financial firm, you have to be very scared of financial regulators and the government, and that comes in the way. So those who are under the power of the government are far less likely to be able to speak their minds, and they're actually better than they seem in writing. So don't judge them when you see their constrained writings, because actually there is a full bubbling mind behind there, but they're just living out the institutional constraints. So when you and I speak with each other, we are fresh and comfortable and irreverent, but many people in the society are not. And so let's just take into account these aspects when we consume their writings.
But I would also say that arguments matter, people don't, and equally ideas matter, people don't. Ideas last, ideas change the world, people die. So to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you just live in the world of ideas and not think too much about personalities.
Okay, Onkar N says, to me, is pride a negative emotion? Does hubris always follow pride? Yeah, I generally think pride is always a negative emotion. It's much better to just push it aside, be a good human being, be fresh and helpless in front of people, go with ideas and so on. Like, the less you do of pride, the better your life will be. Does hubris always follow the pride? I think they are closely related. That uh, to some extent, pride is an external front end where you want to show I'm a tough guy. But sooner or later, you start inhaling your own press releases and then it starts turning into hubris. So I think there is a connection there.
I think your answer is a thinking male answer, and let me explain what I mean. What I mean by that is that there is a thin line between pride and self-respect, between pride and self-esteem. And in Shrana Bhattacharya's memorable line, men tend to be full of unwarranted self-confidence, women are full of unwarranted self-doubt. And therefore, for a thinking man who is thinking about how we naturally are driven so much by ego and so on, it is good to be wary of pride, right? Pride is very likely to be something that corrodes our character and that we will find in ourselves, and we need to watch out for it. But I would say a lot of women don't have enough self-respect. They are full of the imposter syndrome. They don't value themselves enough. And therefore, the mantra I give to any young women who ask me for advice is that wake up every morning and look in the mirror and say, I am awesome. And there, I think a little bit of pride in what you accomplish and a little bit of pride in the work that you do would actually be useful. So I think that nuance has to be taken into account.
Good point. Srinivasan S says to you, Amit, how do you lead a life of knowledge accumulation?
Accidentally, because the things that I need to do, the shows I do, the seen and the unseen, and to a smaller extent, everything is everything, require a lot of research and learning and all of that. So I kind of do that. The other situation I am in, which is both good fortune but has come about because of choices I made and didn't always seem like good fortune, is that I decided some 17 years ago that I'm never going to do a job again. I'm never going to work in a company or be a company man. And so, circa 2006, 2007, I was a managing editor of Cricinfo. I moved to a consultant's role where I was a contributing editor for a couple of years. And then I moved out completely. I wrote that book. I played professional poker for 5 years. I did other stuff. I edited a policy magazine called Pragati for the Takshashila Institution. But that was a remote and part time kind of thing. I was never a company man. And that gives me the time to read when I want, read what I want. I don't have to go down particular tracks, and that has sort of helped. And I have used Rome research extensively in my knowledge management, for example. In our episode on podcasting, episode 49, I demonstrated how I do that and so on. But
And in the productivity episode also.
and in the productivity episode also, we spoke a bit about that. But my sense is that I haven't been as intentional and as disciplined about living the knowledge life as I would like to. I think you've done a far better job of it. But I'm inspired by people like you, and it's always a kick. Like when we sit for an episode of Everything is Everything, and we might know a subject, but then I have to do some research also. And then I do some research, and I feel like my brain expanded a little bit because of the effort I put in. Or the same thing with the seen and the unseen. If my guest has written 8 books, I'll read all 8 of them and whatever. And you feel that, okay, it's a little bit broader, and you might not have retention of the details of all of what you read, but in a broader sense, your view of the world is, and that's good. I think, if you're watching this, even if you don't have shows like mine to do, you need to be intentional about this. If you want to be the best version of yourself, that surely involves reading a lot, taking in a lot of knowledge, figuring out ways to, uh, process that knowledge. So I think this is something we should be intentional about, and I need to try harder, and I'm pretty sure you need to try harder.
Okay, Ajit says to both of us, we need to talk about misinformation and disinformation within academic research itself. The world of academic research is being kicked around by publication bias, incentives and ideology, media misrepresentation. There is the problem of epistemic humility and scientific uncertainty. How should the scientific enterprise deal with all these stresses, and how should all of us operate in the world where the basic knowledge processes are quite flawed and distorted?
We have an episode on this, Fixing the Knowledge Society, about exactly this, or how all the incentives in academia go off in the wrong directions. And the biases when it comes to publications are true, that sensational results will get you published, a middling result won't. So there is always the temptation to juice up your results. You'll do a study 3 times and you'll take the result which is the most sensationalistic, or you can doctor your data. I think Dan Ariely got into a lot of trouble with studies of his. There have been issues of replication with a lot of behavioral studies, which showed that the findings were in the right direction, but not to the magnitude that the original studies say. So that kind of bias is something to watch out for. And also, in the world of public discourse, there is an incentive for public intellectuals to show certainty. Your soundbite will become the headline when you show certainty. The TV channel will call you to be a talking head in that rectangle on the screen when you show certainty about something. And we are both great fans of the probabilistic way of thinking, that the world is deeply complex, and anyone who exudes certainty is in some way either simplifying for a good reason or simplifying for a bad reason, and might just be a charlatan. Book recommendation, middle of the episode. I've recommended it before, but it speaks to this. Super Forecasting by Philip Tetlock and Dan Gardner. Tetlock's a great intellectual, speaks exactly about this, that the people who get things wrong a lot of the time are the TV experts. Everybody thinks of their expertise and how good they are with stuff. But really, the people who get things right a lot are the people who are constantly doing Bayesian thinking, updating their priors, and all of that. And this idea needs to be a little more widespread in society somehow. I'd love to name and shame some of these like society should name and shame some of the charlatans who exude certainty and who go for sensationalism and who do these kind of dishonest papers as so many academics do. So that is one part of the game, but I think academia is deeply broken, and I don't know how that is to be fixed except for a parallel knowledge society coming up in markets that are freer.
Yeah. Yeah, for me too, personally, it was a really, really sad evolution of the understanding about how broken the journal's process is, how the incentives of publication and funding just push people in the wrong directions. And this is part of the explanation about how millionfold increases in expenditures on research and development in the present formal institutions of the society have not given really great gains. It's been disappointing. So you look back 100 years ago, there was no money, and the kind of knowledge that was produced about 100 years ago, when you look from 1900 to 1925, it just blows your mind. There were revolutions in field after field after field that were happening, and today the whole enterprise has lost its way. I also think a lot about how this was driven by high powered incentives. So for us economists and our insistence on the power of incentives, this is also a sobering lesson that when you put up really high powered incentives, so people will goddamn pursue them. And then the knowledge thing will become a minor side effect. Basically, there are careers being played out. It's a business of how to raise money, how to get pubs, how to schmooze with the editors, how to get into the top journals in the top universities, and so on. It is very depressing. Okay, Nimisha Thakur says to Amit, how did you develop your thinking in so many areas without a formal technical education in those areas? In my knowledge, I think you've studied literature. I might be wrong, but you're clearly all over many fields that you've not studied. And for others who want to walk in your footsteps, what do you suggest should be done?
I think the answer is curiosity. Nimisha is right. I did a BA in English literature. That's technically the degree I got from Ferguson College, Pune. And I think I attended 6 classes in the 3 years combined, FY, SY, TY. I only chose English literature because I knew I wouldn't have to study. Um, yeah, so I kind of coasted in those years. I was endlessly curious and I read a lot. And I think I read a lot in the sense that a subject would open up to me when I would understand the first principles. So, for example, my gateway into natural selection was really Steven Pinker's great book, The Blank Slate, after which I read all of Richard Dawkins, Selfish Gene, Blind Watchmaker, etc., etc., the whole shebang. I read, Daniel Dennett, Robert Wright, all of those guys. So, just obsessively went into that rabbit hole. And because once you understand the first principles and you understand the game and what's going on, everything just opens up. Like Douglas Adams has this famous quote about how once he understood natural selection, there was no need to believe in God because he would take the awe of knowledge over the awe of ignorance any day. And I kind of love that. So that's how, though I don't talk about natural selection much, but it really reshaped my view of the world, understanding human nature in that way. Similar journey with economics, right? I did an episode of The Seen and the Unseen with Lant Pritchett where he spoke about how one of his early formative books was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And so that was an early book, but reading Frederick Bastiat early on. And then, of course, you read the popular economics books like The Freakonomics of the World, the Stephen Landsberg books, Tim Harford's great books, The Logic of Life is a particularly good one. And again, the point is not that you need to go deep into the weeds and learn how to do regressions and, be able to give gyan on general equilibrium. The point is that once you get the fundamentals, and once you get the first principles and once they become part of your framework, that, scarcity is a real thing. People respond to that. People respond to incentives. Once you figure out those fundamentals, everything else starts to make sense. We've done an episode on cricket where I use the tools of economic thinking to break down cricket strategy. You know, playing poker again, I dove into poker, and that really taught me about probabilistic thinking, and I think made me a better person in terms of just thinking about the world in a more Bayesian way and being less full of certainty, and therefore being less likely to judge others and less likely to, for example, inculcate pride in myself for the good things that happen to me because, hey, I know that 99% of everything is luck. And it's a management of luck that is a key skill in both poker and life. So I think it's just by obsessively doing deep dives into whatever subject interests you. And it was always fun. So it's not work for me. Like, I'll find a new subject and just dive into it. And I think that's how most people are. And that's fine. Go into the rabbit hole. Don't ask yourself what productive thing will come out of this. If it's a rabbit hole, just get into the rabbit hole. And the more you read, and at some point the fog clears and you see the bigger picture. And I think that. But how is it for you? You've also learned stuff which you didn't study formally.
Yeah, so I was always curious about the world. So while formal education puts you into narrow tracks, I was always reading other things. So you talked about a group of books that blew your mind. I went through essentially that same group of books as a PhD student. So as a PhD student, I was endlessly reading books in biology because it was just so great. It was an interesting subject that I was just doing on the side while I was a PhD student. So I was always interested in the world and like not willing to obey the career demands and the normal narrow track where you're supposed to specialize, you're supposed to have publication orientation. These things always seemed a little misguided to me because actually we are here in this world to build knowledge and understand the world. And, like climbing a corporate ladder is important, but it can't be the defining purpose of your life. And then I luckily managed to have a broad array of knowledge of many fields, ranging from science and mathematics and statistics and economics and history, which kind of gives you a vantage point to go into many, many adjacencies. So I had enough of strong building blocks of science, engineering, computer science, statistics, mathematics, economics, history. These are like things I feel very clear about. And then I'm always ready to go off into things that happen in the world or are interesting and important in the world. I think I was saying to you the other day that when I think of my life story, I just went from deep diving into one grand global drama after another. And I am so grateful that I was there and I intensively read in the Asian crisis, in the 9/11 attacks and Islamic extremism and the wars of Afghanistan, less so for Iraq, and then the 2008 financial crisis, and then the pandemic, and then the rise of modern populism. Like each of these stories were things that I felt deeply curious about, and I had enough entry gates to get into them deeply. So I'm the child of all these big global dramatic events that happened.
There's an old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
For you, it seems to be a blessing, which can only mean you're a sociopath because so much suffering, so much human suffering, so you learn something
Yeah. I'm just like thrilled to bits that I had the experience of living through
that
this.
people are suffering.
Like, when you read about the Great Depression, it's just different. When you read about like our life, I was there, I was watching this data, I know what this person said on this date, I know how I was surprised when the wix crossed 68 and so on.
आपके जिंदगी का सफर दूसरों का सफरिंग है.
Yes. Okay. Saikat Lahiri asks you, Amit, would you be willing to discuss economics in good faith with a left leaning economist or commentator? And I don't mean a fully indoctrinated communist. Some of your non economist guests on the Seen and the Unseen have been leftists, but I would like to see a little more left economics on the Seen and the Unseen.
Firstly, I object to the words in good faith because all my discussions are in good faith. That's the only way to have discussions. And the thing is, I have had so many people, including on economics, on the Seen and the Unseen with whom I disagree. So I've done a lot of that. I would have a discussion with anyone I disagree with unless their priors only are wrong. For example, earlier I spoke about the zero sum fallacy which people commit. And by the way, we have a great episode on economic fallacies, common ones. Do watch that. And if someone is committing that fallacy and, coming from that point of view where the world looks like a fixed pie to them, they don't understand spontaneous order, or they think that society can be shaped from the top down, and etc., etc., we simply know that is wrong. That's not a matter of debate. There's no point in discussing that. And everything prescriptive that comes out of that worldview involves oppression and coercion, which fills me with disgust. So there is no point talking to people like that. Your priors only are wrong. Let's discuss your priors if you want. I'll tell you why this vision of the world is wrong. But anything that emerges out of that, it's fictional fundamentally. There's no reason to discuss it. But otherwise, I have had communists on the Seen and the Unseen. I have had, and where I stand, I disagree with pretty much everyone, this, on some margin or the other. So I have had many of those discussions, except that often they don't seem like debates or arguments because I do it in a very civil way, and they reciprocate and they argue with me in a very civil way, and it never goes off the rails. So in that sense, not only is it something I'm open to doing, I do it all the time.
Saikat Lahiri says to me, who are the most influential Indian economists? And then it takes you in a rumination of what is influential, which I will not do here. But my quick heroes list is the people of the 60s who started waking up and challenging the edifice. And that would be Jagdish Bhagwati, T.N. Srinivasan, Anne Kruger. Yes, Professor Kruger, for this purpose, I treat you as an Indian economist. Arun Shuri, Manmohan Singh, further down the line, Montek Ahluwalia, Vijay Kelkar,
Padma Desai, Ishar Ahluwalia.
Padma Desai, Ishar Ahluwalia. I think these people broke with the convention. They did difficult things. It was not an easy ride for them. They challenged the establishment. They thought clearly, and my God, they made all the difference.
You forgot one man, Narottam Shah.
That too. My father started CMI, which I think was a grand project.
Grand project, and yeah, we should do an episode on him someday.
Okay. Pranit Berry says, what is the role of people in our life? How does one balance solitude and social? How many friends do you need? Do you need to be a people person to succeed in life?
You go for it.
If you define it as success, I would say you could actually go very far without that. What will happen is we'll specialize ourselves into different kinds of life designs. That there are the things that tend to be done in a more solitary way. There are things that tend to be done in a social way. So being more solitary or less solitary is not life, it's not a limiting thing in terms of career success. So if that's what you're thinking, you should be asking yourself that what is a life design that goes with the grain of your character? Okay, put that aside. I think we need people because man is a social animal and our happiness is based on being with people. I also think that most of the time, our ability to think and create is deeply shaped by people. So as I've grown older, more and more, I actually see that the things I'm doing are not coming from inside me. I'm constantly in a process of talking to other people, arguing with other people, and other people are fixing me up. I'm too proud to say so in front of you, but I'm always busy and updating. So, I'm talking to people, I get feedback, I get ideas, I get questions. The things other people are saying that, did you know there's X going on? Do you know what the fuck is going on? Like that. I mean, it challenges you, it opens your mind to questions. So, I think that the journeys of knowledge and creation for me are social projects. When I look back at the history of Europe, you actually see the great physicists of the early 20th century were deeply with each other. They were at Göttingen University. They were going hiking with each other. That is how they argued about the nature of matter and energy. So I think that there's a lot to be said for the social experience.
Agree with all of that, and I would try to give my answer by first defining what I would mean by success. And if we define success as being the best version of yourself, then the answer is yes, you need people and you also need solitude on two different margins. You need people because you only grow through sort of bouncing off people all of the time by taking their ideas, by testing your ideas against them, by learning about the world through them. And ultimately, also, if you want to be happy, I don't think you're going to be happy on your own. You need people in your life, you need to be intentional about relationships and nurture them and so on and so forth. Equally, I think there's a big role for solitude to play, as long as that solitude involves healthy self-reflection and, not just basking in the melodrama of your perceived miseries as Bengalis tend to do. So, yeah.
And Pranit Berry says to you, Amit, what's your strategy in creating good work? It could be building a show, it could be writing a book, it could be curating a course. How do you get yourself to get up and create stuff? Is there a maker habit thing, or do you do planning?
So 90% of the things I wanted to do, 95, 99, 99% of the things I wanted to do, I haven't actually done. So whatever strategy there is, it doesn't work. But the bias for action is there. That's how we started. Everything is everything. That's how, the seen and the unseen just happened. And I, I think once you decide to do something and you're doing it, just throw yourself into it and don't overthink. The problem is too many of us overthink. We let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? We want to get it just right. We think the whole world is watching us. I think the key is ki just do. Like, screw it, just do. Like, I've mentioned it before on the show. I have a face for audio, which is why I did the seen and the unseen. I don't really like the way I look on camera, but I just let it go. So many episodes, I'm like, shit, man, people are going to see this. but, but I just let it go because just do the work. Just do the work, just put it out there, just keep going.
Yeah. Kartiki More says that I'm in love with the humanities. A lot of my friends and family are swept up in digital propaganda and populist narratives. How do I engage meaningfully? I don't want to alienate, I don't want to sound preachy. How do I inculcate and encourage curiosity and awareness in environments which appear very closed?
I have two sort of opposite answers to this. One answer is that without being preachy, and in a sense, the answer is in the question that she's afraid of appearing preachy, so she knows when she's being preachy. So, without being preachy, if you can kind of share your views, gift good books, etc., bring up interesting points of view, that's useful to do, and you're playing your small part. And that's one answer. The other answer is that sometimes there's no point trying, especially if you're talking to elders in your family, like your parents or your uncles or whatever, and they have a particular view of the world, and there's really nothing you can do about it, and you feel like you're banging your head against a wall. And if you bang your head against that wall too much, you'll damage either yourself or your relationship with them. And sometimes a practical thing to do is just to step back and say that fine, people contain multitudes. I love you for all the other things about you. I really dislike this, but I'll ignore it, because paradigms change one funeral at a time. People don't change their minds, they die. That is by and large the truth of how society changes. So, don't fight that losing battle, and also have the humility to accept that maybe in your youthful fervor you might be wrong about something, or you don't see the nuance of something, or you don't get the full context of where somebody is coming from. So, if there are people who cross an absolute red line and you cannot associate with them because they're not part of your family, etc., then don't associate with them. There are certain people who will cross lines of bigotry and sexism, and I just don't want them as my friends. But there are other people who will hold opinions that I disagree with. For example, people will say taxation is not theft, but
Or even write books about it.
or even yeah. But they are friends. I love them for other things, and therefore it's okay. Everything is doesn't have to be a breaking point. It's cool. So I think you change where you can. That's your duty as a good citizen, but don't push too hard when it's futile.
Kartiki More says to me, how do you see India's future? How can young people like me stay hopeful and be part of a meaningful change and not be trapped in the current turmoil? I'm very optimistic about where India is going. I feel that when I look back at the last 100 years, and I include the glory of the INC community, as you describe Gandhiji as a black swan. Okay, these are amazing people. The idea of Nehru sitting in a jail writing letters to his daughter, okay, it's out of the world. These are great people. And after thinking about all that in the last 100 years, I feel that literally for the first time, we're developing some critical mass of intellectual capacity and community in India today, aided, of course, by the internet and access to knowledge. We were a backwater, we were cut off from a lot of global knowledge. Today, there is just greater participation in the world. And so, across the spectrum, whether you say science, engineering, medicine, business, firms, finance, history, humanities, social science, economics, public policy. Okay, like, would you have ever expected that there would be a show like Everything is Everything in India? No, it is really something about modern India, that there is a creative ferment and there is an intellectual capability here in India. So I'm very optimistic that something is going right. A country cannot be better than its elite. It can be much worse than its elite. But we're growing really high capability in India today. And, my thoughts for Kartiki and for all of us is, find your people and find the pleasure of thinking and building, because that is a life worth leading.
I have much less faith in the elite, but if that's a margin on which you can make a difference, that's what you gotta do. And as far as everything is concerned, Ajay Shah, I don't follow the Marxian view here. I follow the great man theory. That if you and I didn't exist, the show would not be there.
But
It is not that the tides of history.
you and I are creatures of social forces.
No, but the tides of history would not make two other people like us do this show. There are no
Yeah,
people like
there would
us.
be
We are
different
unique.
shows. Okay, Mukund Garg says that you have often said you read newsletters and not social media or news media. What are some of the newsletters you subscribe to? I just want to say that that's not an accurate rendition. I very much read the Financial Times and the New York Times and a bunch of the traditional established media sources. I also read many a Substack. If you go to my Substack, I am recommending a bunch of newsletters, so I won't rattle off the names. What do you think?
I mean, I try to read as widely as possible. What are some of the substacks I read? I read Ayla. I mean, I'll talk about the ones I pay money for because it shows I really do value them. I read Ayla, who does great data work in understanding young people today, understanding the sexual life. She's a sex worker and she parlays some of her experience into that, but a very good data scientist as well. And that's a Substack I pay for. I think that there are tremendous insights in her work on modern society. And there's a guy called Signal, Signull. I think we'll link it from the show notes, and you're seeing it on the screen. Uh, Again, came on Twitter, really good tweet suddenly. Had to go to see his newsletter, and now subscribing at $100 a year. Just the quality of the content, like really, thought provoking. Now let's see how long he keeps it up. It's how long they keep it up. Don't know the identity of the person, but that's a good sort of newsletter. I've encouraged many people to start newsletters I rather enjoy, like Mohit Satyanand, my friend. I was visiting him in Delhi and staying with him, and he's run a few episodes of The Seen and the Unseen. And I said, boss, start and be bloody minded, bias for action, gave him my usual lecture. He started, and since then he hasn't missed a Sunday. And it's been like 3 years or something like that. Very proud of him. Vasant Dhar, for whom I used to produce a podcast called Brave New World. I just gave it up to my friend Gaurav Chintamani, who now produces it because I was kind of done with it. But Vasant is a very dear friend. I asked him to start a newsletter. I said, boss, use a personal tone. that'll really work. Don't just make it about the subject. And then I told him, hey, write a book with that personal tone. And I'm proud to tell you, Ajay Shah, that Vasant has finished writing his book. In fact, at the time we are recording, I think yesterday was the date he would have sent the final copy to his publisher.
Lovely.
And I'm just so happy. So three of us were at a conference, me, Lancelot Pinto, and Vasant. And we were at a conference um, where I think you also were. And at that conference, we were supposed to, it was in Kochi, and we were supposed to go on this boat ride. So all of us were taken to this boat, and then a storm started. So we were just standing on the boat. The boat never went anywhere. But we were looking out of the water, and the three of us made a pact, and this is 2 years ago. And we said by the time this conference comes about next year, all three of us would have written a book because we were discussing our books,
Great.
right? And 2 years have passed. I am so happy that my dear buddy Vasant, love him deeply, has written his book. And Lancelot and I, every time we meet each other, we're like, Vasant boss, But hopefully we can get inspired by that and write our books.
Yeah. I remember growing up as a child, the great books in the house were all written by strange, mysterious people far away, most of them not in our personal space. Okay, so I got to meet a fair amount of interesting people, but a large number of the books in the house were just people who were far away. A few days ago, Akshay Jaitley and I were together at lunch. Akshay is at the late stage of finishing up an absolutely grand book. Okay, and you will speak with him at length about it, I'm sure. He and I were saying what a delight, what happiness it is for us to be in this world where basically we are embedded in the world of people building books, and one after another these are the passion projects of our friends and family, and we get signed copies of all these books, and he is planning a shelf of only all the signed books, and me too, I have many signed books that should come together in one shelf. So we're just blessed that we are surrounded by these people. Okay, Manav says to you, Amit, you've talked about podcasting as an episode of the EI. Tell us about writing. So says, how can I proceed if I want to build an audience on Substack and other platforms?
So I teach a writing course called The Art of Clear Writing. I haven't been regular with it. I think my last cohort was October last year. I really, the waiting list has piled up. People write to me every day saying, when are you doing the next one? I've just been incredibly busy and not being able to find the time. So, and also life lessons was ongoing. When I find the time, I'll do the course again. But I would say that when you say, how does one go about building an audience in Substack? I think that focus is wrong. Something that I do not teach and will not teach and don't believe in teaching is how to build an audience. That's not the game. The game is write something good. I keep saying a good product is the best marketing. The first task is you write, and the audience will come later, it will come organically. But you have to write. And otherwise, you get caught in a vicious cycle if you make your creation dependent on the validation of an audience. Because initially, when you start something, you're not good at it and you won't get an audience. And if the validation matters to you, you will stop doing it. And if you stop doing it, you can't get good at it. You get good at it only by doing something bloody mindedly again and again and again without thinking about validation. You and I have achieved many things in life. You're good at many things. When we started Everything is Everything, we knew we would suck at it at the start because it's a new thing for us. And therefore, we made our pact that we'll do 104 episodes, 104 being 2 years, 104 episodes, and then we will take a call. Spoiler alert, we will continue after 104. But so we made that call that वो time तक numbers नहीं देखने का. Just do it, just enjoy it, just learn the craft. So to anyone who wants to write or do any kind of creative activity, I would say that if you begin by thinking about how will I build an audience, how will I go viral, that's completely wrong. You're going to fail. It don't work like that.
Many people, 6 different questions were the same question. How do you remember all this?
So if you see the earlier episodes where I've shown my Rome research, episode 49 and the productivity episode, you'll find that I take copious notes while researching for episodes. So during a seen and the unseen episode, people will find me come up with a quote from somewhere and randomly I'll remember. But I have that open and the database is well organized so something will come to mind and I can search it immediately. But actually what happens is that the typical process when I'm researching for a seen unseen episode is I can read fast and deep at the same time without skimming. So I might read 2, 3 books in a day and I'll just know the books the next day at the time of the recording. But within a week, I've forgotten all the salient details. And whatever important notes I felt are worthy of being captured forever, they are there in my room. So later, if I say, what did Akshay Mukul say about this subject in Gita Press, I can just very quickly look it up. But my memory really isn't great. But then here's the thing, boss, that it's also about sample size. My retention may be low, but if my sample size of consumption is very high, a low percentage of retention still appears to be a lot of content. So if you just read a lot, the memorable stuff will stick with you, whether you take a note or not. And some memorable stuff will keep coming back. Like, and often I worry, in fact, I repeat myself. Like, how many times have I said, he not busy being born is busy dying, right? Dylan bhi bhencho thak gaya hoga. So, you know, so, so often I have my own set of sort of cliches where a thing will come to mind, and then I'll curse myself and say, ki, kya ho raha hai? I'm not reading enough if I don't have enough new things coming into my LLM.
Yeah. Uh, in life lessons, we talk about learning to learn, and there we have been emphasizing the importance of adjacencies. That if you learn topology for the first time, it's all bewildering. But if you actually do calculus and real analysis, and then you get to topology, then it is you move to adjacencies. We remember things that are richly interconnected into our mind, and also living that life, using that knowledge. Like each time, it's like a static RAM refresh. Each time you query that cell, you actually reinforce that memory. Okay, Maurya Krishna says, what is your experiences with using LLMs? Please give us tangible examples.
So, my caveat here is that, as we've discussed in episode 2 of Everything is Everything, where we had a furious argument on this. See, Saikat Lahiri, I have good faith discussions with people I don't agree with. My caveat here is that judging AI today by the state of AI today is like judging computing by looking at a mainframe computer that filled a room in 1954. Thomas Watson, who was president of IBM, once famously said, I think there's a world market for 3 computers. So I think it's very early days. AI is incredible. And already ChatGPT's deep research is fantastic. It's off the charts good. I will use it to supplement the research that I do very often. I'll use it to teach myself stuff. Like I mentioned in my the recent art episode we did, when I was traveling through Spain, I was going to all these museums. I'd make deep research, generate like 20,000 word reports and say that, okay, I'm visiting the Picasso Museum. Give me a breakdown of his life, all his artistic phases, and in this particular museum, what are the key works I should look at in each of the rooms and all of that. Or say I'm going to the Prado or the Reina Sofia. Give me an art history narrative that gives me the history of art, but through the prism of the works in this museum, and tell me in what order I should go to each of the rooms and what should I look at, and it would give me full biographies and full details. And a lot of it is how deeply you prompt. So it stems from your curiosity and prior knowledge and the deepness of your prompts. And ChatGPT Deep Research will, of course, when you ask a question, it'll, before generating the report, it'll ask you follow-up questions. What is the tone you want, and do you want to cover this aspect too? And it'll make suggestions, and that's great. So I think it's pretty wonderful. Obviously, the thing with it is that you have to think for yourself. So I will not use anything I get from there without also going to the source. And deep research will cite everything, and there'll be a link, and you can go to the link, and it's all credible stuff. Perplexity also gives you links for everything. So I think you got to do your own work, you got to do your own thinking. But it's a fantastic tool, and it is a complete Google replacement. Like in Spain, we were going at different, like we went from Barcelona to Madrid by train, and I had a huge ass bag with me. And I was like, on a flight, I can check it in, but here is there a place to keep these huge ass bags? And I asked it to chat GPT, and it asked me which train, and I told it which train, and it said, okay, here's what you got to do. This will be so and so dabba on this platform. You got to go in from here, and there'll be a luggage rack at the start and the end of the coach, and this is where you enter from, and this is where you put it, and this is where it looks like with the photograph. So it's a complete Google replacement for me, and it's remarkable for images. It's remarkable for other stuff. But the important thing is you got to keep your curiosity has to drive what you do with it. It's not going to do your work for you.
Okay, Maurya Krishna says, what mental models do you use in your approach to the world? Mentions Charlie Munger, Shane Parrish, and he also asks, how do you force your reasoned thinking to prevail over intuitive or instinctive ways.
Shane Parrish's books are great. Charlie Munger has always been a source of great wisdom and so on and so forth. I think there is no person who is completely always a font of rationality. You respond to things in a mix of different ways. There is an intuitive response, there might be an emotional response. It could depend on what you had for breakfast that day and whether you're hungry. It could depend on who is saying thing X to you rather than thing X, and so on and so forth. But by and large, when you think about important stuff, you use whatever models you have gathered over time. There are many, everything is everything. We teach a bunch of, like, the first webinar of our life lessons course is frameworks for looking at the world. So we teach a bunch of them there. And would you like to talk about our course, Ajay? This is your moment to plug. You like to be a salesman.
Yeah, life lessons is great.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's your plug.
Yeah, so we've done it twice, and after the second, I'm convinced that something is going right.
We've done 2 cohorts. We had 52 people sign up for cohort 1, 38 people sign up for cohort 2. The idea was that Ajay and I have learned a lot of life lessons that life taught us. We didn't get it from school or college or whatever. So we thought, let's put it together and try to teach the stuff that we wish someone had taught us when we were 20. And so we did that, and the response has been great. So we linked the page from the show notes. You can, leave your name in the form. Our next cohort is the third cohort is going to be in September. Already there's a really nice community formed of all of the people who are who've done the first 2 cohorts. They have city meetups. There was a North America meetup. There have been a couple of Bombay meetups. There's been a Bangalore meetup. There are book clubs running in both of them, by the way. And we are having an offline meetup in Goa in October, towards the end of October. So if you attend the September cohort, you'll be able to come for that and meet many of these people. And it's a community of curious people who want to learn about the world across all age groups. So I'm excited.
Peer Manzoor says to you, Amit, what's the ultimate benefit of reading books? And he has a whine about you. Why can't I find all your writings in a chronological order?
The benefit of reading books, and I had a column on it a while back, we'll show it here and link it from the show notes. But the benefit is this, that we form a picture of the world by joining dots. And therefore, the more dots there are, the more high definition our picture will be. And how do we gather those dots? From our own personal experience, we can only gather so many dots. But from reading books, that's a best way to gather a lot of dots. We live one life, but every time we read a book, we are living the life in that book. We are living multiple lives. So that's really the benefit. Your view of the world gets larger, and consequently, your view of yourself gets larger. If you know more about the world, you know more about yourself, and it feeds into itself, and so on. And that's really sort of the benefit. What was the second question?
Why can't I find all your writings in one clean place in chronological order?
So I was a very active blogger between 2003 and 2008. I wrote a blog called India Uncut. That saved in that kind of bloggy format where I think you can see month-wise archives. I did some 8,000 posts in that time. But there's nothing that's worth preserving there. It's a curiosity, as in just a young person just writing and whatever. It was a good writing gym for me. And I started the India Uncut newsletter where you can see things in a chronological form.
What
But
about all the TOI stuff?
so they are there. I mean, if you go to indiauncut.com and you look in the columns tab, you'll find all my TOI stuff and all my columns for everybody else, and there are hundreds of those. And they'll be in reverse chronological order. But, the thing is that I think about one's writing as, using the framework of stock and flow. That flow is blogging, columns, and all of that, and it's necessary and important because you're thinking aloud. Your writing makes you think better. You're throwing your ideas at the world and learning from the feedback you get, and it's useful for that. Whereas stock is books, and I haven't done enough of stock, and there is nothing stock worthy, I think, in most of my flow. So it's not something that I think about, or oh, how will people browse it better. I don't value it that I value that I did it, but I don't value the content that is there so much.
I found that uh, what I wrote, what I have been writing on the Leap blog and in the newspaper columns, mostly in the Business Standard, I basically applied the same research literature mindset of pushing to novelty. So then it becomes stock worthy. And then I pull it and I use it. So I find the books are integrative projects, that when the idea first occurs, that moment of novelty tends to be a blog article or a newspaper column often. And of course, there are many, many papers. And then the beauty of a book is you get to integrate a lot of knowledge together in a big tapestry. So I feel books are the leap of integration. The small inventions happen along the way. Nikun Shah says, how do you think about money?
You are the best person to answer this. Everything I have learned about money, I think I must have learned from you.
Uh, I just want, right now, I just want to say one line. So I don't want to do personal finance while we do have a session of that in life lessons. I just want to say money is like blood. You need money to live, but it's not the point of living. So as long as we handle ourselves there, that it's not the way in which we keep score of the video game. It's not the objective function to maximize. And yes, of course, we need money. As long as we'll handle ourselves like that, we'll go far in life.
And I would just add that one lesson that I've learned is that over the long arc of a life, you will find that the real scarcity is time. It's not money. When we are young and we are making a life for ourselves, and obviously money is a scarcity, you think about money, you want more money, etc., etc. But really, the real scarcity is time. That's what you will definitely run out of.
Sriram D says almost all intellectuals fear irrelevance and they fear controversy. Okay, so like two extremes. What is one unpopular prediction you have about India's future that nobody wants to hear, but you think it's inevitable?
So first I will say about irrelevance and controversy that if you care about any of them, you're thinking wrong because both of them depend on the world's response to you, right? I will do what I'm doing. I don't care if I'm relevant or not. And equally, I don't care if it's controversial or not. If I am going to depend on what other people, if I'm going to, if my self-image depends on what other people think of me, it's a deep trap and it can only lead to unhappiness. There's nothing else, and anxiety. So I think those frames of looking at it are wrong. What unpopular view of India do I have in terms of what will happen? The future is unknown unknowns. I'm really not, you know, I have no sense of certainty about this, but I find that the fact that it is unknown unknowns is actually a cause of hope because there are many things about our fractured society or where our economy is or where our politics is that I don't like today. But I think that things change very fast. A week
So
is a long
he's putting
time.
up a high bar, but you think it's inevitable. So, like really high levels of certainty.
I'm never going to be that certain about anything being inevitable. It's just this thing. I think what is inevitable is that the world as it is in 2040 is something that we cannot visualize right now. It's impossible.
There are two things which I would put a high probability on, but they're not controversial. Meaning, I think everybody roughly knows this, but they're worth putting up. That high probability things that are going to go in what you and I will consider a bad direction. One is the demographic transition, that there's really a dramatic decline in fertility rates in India, and we're going to have a lot of the difficulties of a rapidly aging nation. And I feel that's like reasonably sure. There is no easy way to reverse that problem. And the second is the global warming, that I feel it's baked in. There is no material pathway to changing the trajectory of rising temperature. And in India, there will be quite a bit of difficulty and anguish around that. Uh, Sairam continues to Amit. In this hyper networked world, do you believe individuals can still become independent identities, or are we just trapped in other people's ideas and communities?
What an outstanding question. Really good question. I mean, what is an individual identity? I mean, who are we? I like when I talk about reading, for example, and I'll take a brief digression. When I talk about the importance of reading, when my writing students say that why should I read, or they don't say why should I read, but they talk about the importance of reading, and I say let's do a thought experiment. Imagine you're a baby and you're brought up all alone in a room with no one speaking to you. Like maybe people come in to look after you, but the first 8 years of your life, you do not hear language. No one speaks to you, no one speaks to themselves while you're listening. There's no television, there's nothing. What language will you gain? And the truth is, you won't learn to speak, even if the grammar of the structures of language are embedded in our brain. And Chomsky and all have written about this. Pinker's written about this in his great book, The Language Instinct. Regardless of that, without hearing words, we won't speak. What if, in a version of this thought experiment, only your parents speak, and they speak to them, each other, and to you, but nothing else? Then you'll have a limited set of words and a limited personality. What if you also have a television on? Then you'll have a wider set of words. What if you live a normal life, you're playing with kids in the mohalla, you're chilling out, you're going to school, etc., etc. Then you'll be fully like you and I, and etc., etc. Especially if you are fortunate enough to have many books at home to read, then that's even kind of wider. So I think that you cannot separate the individual from the context of the society that you're in, right? So when like we had a question on we had an episode on is character contingent, where we spoke about, are you who you really think you are? That a slight change in the chemical composition of your brain can just make you a completely different person. The story of Phineas Gage, the rod goes through his brain, a part of his brain gets damaged, he becomes an entirely different person. So I don't think that there is any solidity to the concept of you. And therefore, to ask that, can I exist outside of this? And the answer is really no, and that's okay. You can still, insofar as there is free will, and even if there is no free will, you have to behave as if there is. You still get to choose who you hang out with, what you read, what your influences are, and that shapes you. How do you ever escape that? I think there's a weird kind of conceptual conceit in thinking that I am something unique outside of all of this. I mean, I don't know what that is unless it's an animalistic shell. Do you have anything to say?
Sairam D says to me, same person, Sairam D says to me, how would you prioritize long term uh, problems of climate change while achieving economic growth and equity? I'm an optimist around the problem of climate change in the sense that the energy revolution has worked, that we have grown and improved beyond our wildest dreams on the solar power and the wind and the nuclear and the storage. So, uh, levels of carbon taxation will nudge the world economy to go towards all the new energy technologies, and we'll get this done without a big disruption. So I'm not that worried about the problem, that it is possible to sustain the basic story of economic growth while stopping this. It's a problem of a global public good. Why will the countries come together and make a treaty? Each country has an incentive to renege. I have a paper in the works on this subject where, for the moment, I push aside the international relations problem. I just say, if all the world would cooperate and you did the requisite carbon taxation, it's not that difficult to cope with this, primarily because the scientific and engineering revolutions are here.
I would also say that check out our nuclear energies. I think nuclear is part of the answer. As France has shown, like their per capita pollution, the specific measure of how much damage they cause to the climate per unit of energy used is by far, I think, the lowest in Europe. And it's because they adopted nuclear, which both of us believe is the safest form of energy. Both of us don't believe it's the safest form of energy. It is. That's the data. That's simply there. And also on climate change, I think that because there is an incentive for a lot of the NGOs and so on working on this field to raise funding to make things look worse than they are. I would beware a little bit of the alarmism. Climate change is real. It's caused by us. We have to do something about it. But the alarmist estimates, I am very, very skeptical about. I think the problem is less bad than it appears, and the solutions are closer and will be better than they appear. So I'm not worried at all.
And finally, he says, what is one non-economic aspect of Indian life that is fatally misaligned with modernity?
Our approaches towards family. Our notion of the conventional structure of marriage. Like for most of India, except for elites like us, for most of India, I think marriage is death for women. It destroys their agency and their individuality. I often talk about one of the great TILs I've, in all my years of doing the seen and the unseen, from Chinmay Tumbe's book India Moving, which is about internal migration in India. That the largest internal migration happens when a woman gets married. Because women get married and they go from one village to their husband's village. Often even their name is changed, telling you what a drastic change in identity it is. They lose all their childhood friends. Men will have their childhood friends. Women often tend to lose all of that, get uprooted, and then it is life in the service of the husband. And often you will find that, and I've seen this with multiple examples recently, that there's an old lady, her husband had died, and suddenly she's like a new person. It's like she's free, she's blooming, she's learning an instrument, or she's traveling solo, and all these are real examples I've seen around me. And they may not think of their marriages as being necessarily being so constricting while they are in it, because that's a structure they kind of flowed into, and they never seemed to be an alternative, and it was normalized. But I think our views around family and marriage can often be deeply toxic. And I understand that there are reassuring elements to it, and I get the conservative viewpoint, but I just think that it's a barrier towards modernity. But what precisely modernity would bring in its place, I'm not entirely sure, because I had an episode on finding love in modern India, and even for young people, and perhaps we'll do an episode on this someday, even for young people, finding love on dating apps and trying to negotiate relations between the sexes is deeply complicated. So I'm not saying one is better and the other is worse or whatever. Essentially, everything is fucked up.
Okay, Shraddha says, I buy your arguments around the importance of economic growth and the whole difficulties with our socialistic past. Do you see that changing in the younger generation? Do you see the possibility of high GDP growth in India in the future?
You have to answer this first.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think the genie is out of the bottle. There was a bad period in the world economy from 1914 to 1945, which encouraged more statist solutions. And for one or two generations, people were filled with more toxic ideas. So you got a whole statist approach, including by many economists. But I think now in India, we have tasted the market economy and attitudes are changing. We're increasingly globalized. We're increasingly plugged into the world. We are part of the global systems of trade and engagement. And so I think bit by bit, the capitalistic ethos, the business ethos, that sense of comfort and common sense surrounding capitalism is making progress in India. There are parts of the Indian young people ecosystem who are a little brainwashed with the social justice stuff that has become mainstream in Western campuses. But I'm optimistic it will pass. I mean, it is like they're really bad ideas. A little bit of logic will help disrupt those ideas. When those people get to the workplace, they will understand the world better.
So I feel like you interact with more policymakers than I do, but I probably interact with more young people than you do. And my sort of sneaky sense of this is that I'm not talking about the social media fringe and all of that, but my sneaky sense of it is that India's default religion has been the religion of the state. We look to the state as our my baap, and we look to it for every solution. And I think this is still the default thinking for most young people. This is just how they think, that if there's a problem in the world, the government should solve it. If there's something I don't like about society, इसको बैन करना चाहिए. The default view in any young person, except maybe some elites who watch good stand-up comedy, but the default view otherwise will be that free speech is a
What
bad thing.
everything is everything.
Yeah, so our audience is perhaps not an indicator of this, but I would say that the default view is still statist and is going to be for every generation, because it fits in with that intuitive top-down thinking and the zero-sum way of looking at the world. And as we described in our economic fallacies episode, those are hardwired into us, so it's a battle each generation must fight anew. As Thomas Jefferson allegedly said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Okay, Tarun says, why does everybody start thinking in terms of nation states? Why is it not challenged more?
That's a really great answer, and there's a theory that I've been um, awkwardly articulating for the last few years, that just as in many other domains, I see the mainstream crumbling. Like in media, the mainstream has crumbled and everything is fractured, and etc. etc. And that's happened in media, it's happened in entertainment, it's happened in industry across industry. And I wonder if, in terms of the worlds we mentally occupy, that's also happened that in terms of nation states being more relevant to how we think of our identity and the things that we do. Like both of us, grew up in a time where we were restricted to communities of circumstance mainly being geography. Where you are is where you find people, where you make friends. And the internet freed both of us, and certainly for me, it's a very big deal that I could form communities of choice. And geography was no longer destiny, and I was not bound by is this person in my immediate vicinity. So I think notionally, in that sense, nation states get kind of less and less relevant as time goes by, but they exist and we have to follow their laws. And so
They have
there's
coercive power.
they have the coercive power. It is what it is in the real world. Now we may shrink our involvement in that world, but it's there. And dynamically how it plays out over the next few centuries, I have no idea, but it's fascinating. We take the world for granted as it is, but India as a nation state has been here for about 78 years. And if you really look at the vast sample size of history, if you were to do a time lapse on how maps change, they just change rapidly all the time in very interesting ways. So you never know.
Yeah. We had done an EIE episode on lines on borders, and it is both a fact of history that over the last 50 years, the lines have softened, that the extent to which states interfered in the movement of goods, services, labor, capital, ideas has gone down a lot. And I do believe it will keep going because it just makes so much sense. Like using the coercive power of the state to interfere in the voluntary actions of consenting adults which span the boundary is just a really dumb idea. And imagine there's no country. It's easy if you try. But Tarun then has a follow up to that start question. He says to Amit, how do you keep your humor alive while looking and understanding the absurdity of the world?
As I say, the world is a tragedy to those who feel, a comedy to those who think. So let us just say that I have. That sounds very pompous, isn't it? But our first question that we took was about thoughtful people. So it is okay to think sometimes. But actually, the world is deeply funny also. See, here's the deal. The fundamental truth about the world is mortality. We are going to die, right? That's fundamentally a tragedy. Now, once you take that fundamental tragedy into account, and we are both atheists, kindly see atheism episode, awesome episode, I'm very proud of it. So, once you take that fundamental fact into account that we are going to die, there is no tragedy greater than that. Every tragedy pales in comparison, right? So then when you start stressing about कि मैंने ये article लिखा Twitter पे किसी ने ये बोला इसके बारे में, you feel like laughing when you think I'm taking that seriously, I'm going to fucking die. So yeah.
So, our friend Amrita Agarwal always says that you're going to go into a precipitous health collapse and death with probability 1. That end is going to be horrible. So, what you're going to do? And the answer is like, live here, live in this world, find the delight and the excitement and the happiness of being here. It's a glorious thing that we are alive.
Everything is everything and everything will die.
Tarun says to me, you have mentioned many times that I was shaped by my relationship with my father and the time and the place, the people. What should people do when they lack such things in their life? Just not been nurtured in these ways. How do you keep the fire burning? So the first few things I want to say is that we are all given a hand of cards. Okay, and so I don't whine about privilege. We're all given a hand of cards. Some are pretty, some are ugly, some are tall, some are short, some are rich, some are poor, some have books in their house, okay, some have music in their house, some have nothing, and so on. So there is a random hand of cards that we are given, and a good constructive, energetic and positive approach to the world is, I am here, I was dealt a hand of cards, how do I make the best of it? So I feel there's no point looking back and whining about structural injustice. It is far more interesting to ask the question of doing. Like the only interesting question is what we're going to do, and actions matter, and how are we going to chart our life. So that's just my general idea, that don't make too much of this privilege. I mean, there are all kinds of ups and downs, and various people have various pluses and minuses in the random luck that they are given. And then the second is, so if you're born without wings, do everything you can to not prevent them from growing. So, get on the journey of culture and knowledge and people, and you're watching Everything is Everything. You've come to the right place, and build a good life that is available to everybody.
I think people contain multitudes, and the worst thing a person can do is tie themselves in a narrative of victimhood and oppression. And, your identity of birth or your circumstances don't define who you are. You can rise above them. And, yeah, so one should embrace one's multitudes and take that into the future.
Not become victims of victimhood.
Well said. Yeah.
Uh,
Oppressed by victimhood even.
the social injustice of victimhood.
अबे यार question पर भाई.
You get me started, but
No, I didn't get you started. You got yourself started.
Samprikta says to you, Amit, how did you overcome your Twitter addiction?
I mean, I don't. I curate my feed better. So firstly, I engage a lot less because nobody's arguing in good faith. Those important words. Nobody's arguing in good faith. People look for gotcha moments. Everybody's trying to shit on everyone else too. Like the act of passing judgment on someone else is an act of ego. You are saying, look how knowledgeable I am. Look how virtuous I am. And this is all that, Twitter in its worst days, I think, which are behind us, had become. Now I've curated my feed. One, I don't engage at all. I just post my links. And uh, two, my curated feed is pretty good, and even the algorithm serves me well. So there's a following and there's a for you, and both of them work really well for me by now. So I'm kind of happy with it. But apart from that, I think there's an app on the phone which you can restrict the time you spend on Twitter and Instagram, though I'm not on Instagram, but I mean, I have a lurker account. So you can use those apps and, 30 minutes each, half an hour each, it's useful.
Manraj says to you, Amit, did you ever experience self-doubt, uncertainty, self-loathing, creep by Radiohead in your personal life? How did you cope with it? What would you say to young people who are playing Creep by Radiohead on loop?
Yeah, so first I would say that like I played Creep by Radiohead on loop when it first came out in the early 90s, but there's so much else by Radiohead which is just awesome. Just awesome. Just is also awesome. If you remember that song and the video of it, which is a masterpiece, by the way, we'll link it from the show notes. So there's a lot else by Radiohead which is great. They did that song when they were really young. When you are really young, you tend to get carried away in your self-pity and oh, woe me and etc. etc. And eventually you kind of get over it. And the thing is that, revel in the doing of things is what I would say. The reading of good books, the watching of good cinema. Life is not a spectator sport, so revel in the doing of things and you will be fine. Good friend of mine says life is not a spectator sport. His name is Ajay Shah. But
And he
we brought
always
we brought a football to this farm this time and we said play with us and he's refusing to play with us.
and he always says, play football, don't watch football.
Correct. And are you playing football, Ajay Shah?
No. Ajinkya says to Ajay, what's your favorite restaurant? I love the weirdo sardo bread of Bombay. JD Chandrawat says to Amit, when are we going to see the return of Chikora Amit from My Friend Sancho, the one who has countless funny fantasies in his head?
Yeah, that was the book.
Look at the sadness. Look at the sadness.
The fun me will emerge in better books, so you just gotta wait for them. But am I not funny on the show sometimes? Am I not? You never laugh.
10 on 10.
I will say 10 on 10 things sometimes, and I will find Ajay Shah is not laughing, and it's very sad. I mean, do you enjoy them?
Anjana says to you, Amit, okay, I have to appear composed on the show.
What's Anjana going to think? You're laughing at a question.
No, it's
You're
just
laughing at me.
the juxtaposition is perfect. Anjana says to you, Amit, with so many influencers recommending various hair care routines, it's tough to assess their credibility. I want to know from you, Amit, how to make sure that you have healthy hair and the importance of internal and external factors for the same.
I absolutely don't know. Um, I love shower gels and shampoos and I've experimented a lot. And I use a shampoo called something quotidien. It's a daily shampoo by Bath and Body Works. It's pretty awesome. But I should be the last fucking influencer you look at for hair. Like you look at my hair, so
That scene from a show where you ruffled up your hair, that has made waves.
No, it has not made waves. I also know how to look at the analytics, but
Okay, and then Alap says to you, Amit, would you consider keeping a seagull as a feathered friend?
where is this question coming from?
Seagulls are bastards.
Correct. You said seagulls are
So
bastards.
would you keep a seagull as a pet?
If a seagull is a bastard, why would I keep a seagull as a pet?
Okay,
I'd
and
keep Steven Seagal as a pet.
and Alap says to me, would you make a vlog out of a hike in the future? So, my dear friend Namsita, shall we? Okay, deal. Bhuvanesh Bhavan says to me, as a software engineer, how can I contribute positively to the world? Okay, first, be a good human being. Okay, just think about your place in the world. Read books, nurture good relationships, build knowledge, make yourself a good human being. And in the field of software, there are many, many natural pathways. Okay, practice your craft, write good stuff, don't write shitty stuff, become perfectionist, come participate in the great open source projects of the world, come participate in the engineering enthusiast communities around you, contribute your world knowledge to others, fuel the passion and energy of others.
I want to add to that and say that whenever there's a question with the structure, as an X, how can I contribute to the world? I'm like, do X well. So like you said, do software well. That's it. That's your contribution to the world. You don't need to feed the hungry or whatever. If you're doing things for which people are paying you, that means you're bringing value to their lives and you're contributing to the world. And that's respectable and that's awesome. And we are all fortunate that we can contribute to the world in ways that allow us to do what we enjoy doing or are good at as well. So, that's all. Be good.
Deepu says to me, what is your problem with labor unions? Okay, my problem with labor unions is it's market power. A bunch of people have banded together and they are saying, you take it or leave it, you have to deal with me and I will negotiate as a group. And that is a market failure. It's called market power. And you will get a Pareto superior outcome if we will switch over to a more atomistic model that each person chooses. Do I want to stay at this place? Do I want to leave? There is an open, flexible labor market. So the healthiest way to think of these matching markets is there should be free entry and free exit.
Agree entirely. And but I mean, I'm completely for, like, people should be free to form a labor union, but the kind of ways in which labor unions have associated with companies, those kind of narratives of evil exploitative capitalist versus poor worker and etc., are, I think, deeply dangerous, and they harm workers often more than they help them. But that said, they have a right to exist, so I don't have a problem with them. Ajay, do you have a problem with them?
Yeah. When you do collective bargaining, implicit in it is the threat that all of us together will not show up to work tomorrow and the work of the company will shut down. That is a threat.
So, what do you need butter and achar for? Question for you. What do you need butter and achar for?
To eat thepla.
Paratha optimality.
Yeah. Okay, Mukul Dubey says to you, Amit, how on earth did you overcome cricket addiction? I was a cricket fanatic, and when India when India won the World Cup, I feel India has won, but I'm still a loser. I can't get away from cricket addiction. How did you stay away from IPL and all the tournaments?
I diversified my portfolio, as it were, that one can have many obsessions. And if you think about competing obsessions, cricket as an obsession takes the most time because games last the longest. Like even a T20 game, if you think about it, is lasting a few hours. And if you follow the IPL, for example, it's like a few hours every evening to 2 months are gone. It doesn't make sense. So eventually, it's uh, 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 I mean, I don't know if I'd call them addictions, but there were other things that you can do with it. Like the sports I follow include cycling, for example, which requires less of an investment of time and is deeply satisfying. It gives me all the drama, it gives me all the stories. We have an episode on that where I shared my love for the game. So, yeah.
Mahek Sadhwani says, what is your philosophy to get through trying times in life?
I mean, just keep doing what you're doing. Take joy in, take, you know, cherish the small happinesses, do what you do. We are incredibly fortunate in many different ways. So think about the ways in which you're fortunate and enjoy them. That said, when you go through a trying time for whatever reason and you're emotionally distraught or whatever, rationality can sometimes go out of the window, right? It is what it is. But you got to soldier your way through and one comes out at the other end, but nobody is immune. There's no perfect rational man who can, withstand the stormy forces of
Life.
life.
Srinivasan S says to me, don't you compare yourself to your peers in IIT? You should have been building businesses and making money. So, no, I don't compare myself to them. I'm happy. I have a good life. So, I mean, the opportunity cost of making money is all the time you have to put into it. Kartiki More says to you, Amit, looking back at your life, what was the light that motivated you, the shadow that challenged you, and the horizon you are striving for in both personal and professional life?
Oh my God. I don't even know how to. Uh, s-
The light, the shadow, the
yeah,
horizon.
yeah. We won't go into personal life, but in general, um, the light would be, I think, my joy in the creative arts, whether it is writing or music or cinema or whatever. All of that is light. You watch something good, you read something good, you want to create, you create something, you feel awesome about it. I think that is the light. And that's also a way of engaging with the world and knowing yourself, and that is a light. The shadow is, I think, the character flaws I have had, such as inadequate willpower, not enough discipline, not doing stuff enough. That is a shadow which hopefully I will overcome. And the increasing scarcity of time makes one think that got to fight that shadow. And the horizon is just being the best version of myself, and therefore just being able to express myself in all of those ways. If I may ask you, what is your answer?
I feel I'm immersed in a story of building knowledge and building community. I don't think of outcomes. I'm happy in the process. That just every day I'm thrilled to wake up and get an opportunity to be this life. And I just do it, it gives me satisfaction. Okay. And Amit, uh, an obscure viewer called Namsita says, for people in creative fields, we try to nurture our souls, but it's also our bread and butter. What is the path to finding an income? What should we be thinking about marketing? How do we put ourselves out there and yet find the balance so that we are doing things that mean something to us and we're also pleasing the world adequately?
It's a good question. There's only one Nomsita in India. She's sitting behind the camera here. Hello, camera. So, I've struggled with this as a young person, where everything I did was sort of, while I'm in the waiting room to achieve creative greatness, I have to do other stuff, like whether I'm a copywriter, whether I'm writing scripts for MTV in the 1990s, or whether I'm doing journalism. And none of that is stuff I want to do. I want to do other stuff. So I would say two things. One is that it's fine. It's a ridiculously idealistic vision of the world if you think that 100% of the time from the time you start will go into the creative work that you want to do. It doesn't really work like that. My way of thinking about it is that if 70% of your work is drudgery and stuff you have to do, but 30% is where you can do work that satisfies you, then I think that is great. You're very lucky to have that 30%. Most people don't have that 30%, and most people don't even have that glorious feeling of being able to create things and feeling those urges. So I think that's fine. When you're coming up in life in your early years, you are going to have to do that. You are going to have to go out and do all kinds of shoots and do gigs, and you're making a living, and that's true. But in the end, realize that you have to be, and I probably didn't do enough of this, so there's a lesson here. You have to also be bloody minded about that 30%, that you have to keep working on yourself and not postponing that, and doing your own work on the side, maybe writing on the weekends, or doing your own thing half an hour a day or whatever, figuring out a way to make that work. The second thing I would say is that if you're in the creative field and that is your profession, then even in the other stuff that you do for money, you are learning the craft better. You are experimenting better. You are thinking about your craft better. You're asking why better. Why should I frame it like this? I am shooting this person who is in this mood, and this is a feeling I want to create. How should I frame it? How should I light it? How should I, what music should I play? How should I edit it? Etc. Etc. So I think if you just keep sharp and don't just go through the motions when you're doing stuff, but if you're fully involved, like that's great, that great quote I love, how you do the small things is how you do the big things. So even that 70%, which is drudgery, should have your care and attention. And if you just take that ethic to, to your life, you'll be fine. And over time, you will find that money problems get less and less, at which point the 30% should get more and more. One problem is you become really successful in your work and you just, that proportion stays the same and it becomes 90-10 and it becomes 100-0, and that original dream that you started with, that spark that you had, you kind of lose that. And as you go along the journey of life, you will get a higher and higher degree of comfort, hopefully. You shouldn't lose the fire. That fire is the whole point. That fire is who you are.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask them?
Yeah, ask them.
Uh, we are nearing 104. Will the show go on?
What do you think?
I think yes, absolute banging yes.
The show will go on. The show will go on. You know why, Ajay Shah? The show will go on not because we like the show. The show will go on because we like the company. And I'm not talking about you, Ajay Shah. Don't be so happy. He's fucking blushing. I'm talking about a fine crew, the 4 of us. We come here, 3 of us play football, 1 guy doesn't. And we have such a great time and it is awesome. So the show will go on. Do you agree that the show will go on, Ajay Shah?
The show must go on.
The show must go on.
Now we're nearing 104 off camera. So get up, come on the right.
Huh.
Come in the center. Let's have come time.
Come stand. What do we have to do?
Ready?
I can't jump
Just
because the
check
ground is
Okay, we were not all
literally.
visible. So
And it's
I know what you want.
life is not
Ready?
as.
Put your hand out like this.
Mm.
The step is 1, 2,
Mm.
1, 2,
Wait. 1, 2,
and 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Ready?
Okay,
We'll
go.
Together.
Uh-huh.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to do it साथ में.
I'm doing it. I'm doing my best.
Take more training than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll do a
Final
bow.
thing.
Okay.
Final
Okay.
thing.
We'll do a bow.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.